Hello and welcome. Today I'll be talking very briefly about bicycle frame sizing with a special look of road bicycles, but it goes in a general, so bicycle frame sizing and some basic road bicycle fitting. So the first thing that many people still worry about and look and use to compare frame sizes is the seat tube length. So this is what I mean. And if we take this bicycle seat tube, it's usually measured from the center of the bottom bracket to the top of the seat tube. So we can say that this one is about 51 centimeters, roughly speaking. They either express it in centimeters or in inches, and people rely on that to give them some idea of how big a frame is. And I often hear when people ask advice about frame size, someone will tell them how high are you and measure your inseam height, and then they give them the frame size in centimeters or inches. But if we take a look at this frame, here you can see that this part of the top tube is lower than this part of the top tube. And so if manufacturers knew how to design a frame with a horizontal top tube, that is not an easy thing to do. If you want a frame to have good geometry to ride and handle properly, it takes some thinking and some knowledge and experience to build a frame with a horizontal top tube. That's how frames used to be built, and if you compare different frame sizes with horizontal top tubes, then the length of the seat tube, because it gathers with the top tube, is a comparable attribute. However, with modern frames, manufacturers are usually clueless. If I give myself the liberty to say that, that's my opinion. And they just do this wherever it lands, however it works in their CAD software or whatever the Chinese company that builds the frames has in their stock at the time. And so these vary with sometimes they are lower, sometimes they are higher. And so if we take this frame and if it had a horizontal top tube, then it would not be 51 centimeter size, but it would be like 56 or maybe 57 size, but it is the same frame in terms of what matters for bicycle fit, and that is how far away the handlebars are from the bottom bracket. And when you put your saddle at the appropriate height from the bottom bracket relative to your leg length, how far they are from each other. So that those heights and also how high the bars are from the bottom bracket, because those are things that you use for fitting. I'll put a link to my article explaining bicycle fitting, where I've explained all that. And if I don't forget, I'll also make it pop up a video about the effective frame sizing that is called stack and reach. I won't take much time here to explain it, to read that article, stack and reach explained, but here I'm just explaining that the length of the seat tube is irrelevant, because just like with the horizontal top tube, they can also make this tube be at a bit greater angle and have this a bit shorter. But with all the other angles and everything and this height the same, it's the same size frame for the same person of the same height, the same leg length. Okay, the only difference is how much seat post will protrude. If you have a lower, shorter this tube with the same geometry, everything else, then seat post will protrude a bit more. You would need a longer seat post, and maybe the frame will be lighter because the tubes will be a bit shorter and seat post is not as heavy as the tube. So depending on the seat post, of course, and vice versa. If you have a horizontal top tube, then you will have very little seat tube protruding, but that's all the difference. So that is why this is irrelevant. What is relevant are stack and reach, and I've made a detailed article explaining how to measure those, but for a quick reference, what is called effective top tube diameter, and that is from the center of the top section of the top tube, you start measuring horizontally to the center of the seat post. So it's important to keep the ruler horizontal, and this frame is about 55 centimeters effective top tube length, or maybe 55.5, something like that. So That is relevant, but even more precise is if you measure the stack and reach and figure out which work for you. Only they take a bit longer to measure, a bit more complicated, but this gives you a ballpark value. And now, before we go to any fitting or anything, just another note, I have an article explaining minimum seat post insertion. And what I mean by that, there I explained that you want, if the top tube comes together with the seat tube at a greater height, so it's not super low, then you want the seat post to be at least 1 inch or 2.5 centimeters below this weld. Why? Because when you sit on a seat post and you lean on it, you have your weight, it acts like a lever. So if you just insert it a little bit, you will be able to break your frame by using seat post as a lever. You want it inserted deep enough so that it is held on by the longer tube and then held in place by the clamp. So that way you don't have so much of a lever. You are giving the frame a chance to hold it in place. So I cannot hold this like this, it will easily go, but if I have a good grip firm, then it's better. So that is the minimum seat post insertion. So in terms of this length, just make sure that you have a long enough seat post. For me, for my height, if you are not sure if this tube goes down way below, then just make sure to have at least 15 centimeters. I have no idea how many inches is that I would have to calculate, divided by 2.54, and you will get inches, but at least 15 centimeters if you don't have this weld relatively close. So in either way, don't have it less than 9 centimeters inserted. Even if this is very high, this weld, and you get below 2.5 centimeters, make sure that you have at least 9 centimeters insertion. And they usually have that marked like minimum insertion on seat post, and it is roughly 9 centimeters with most manufacturers. But even if they put it lower, you just make sure that it's at least 9 centimeters inserted for your optimal seat height. If you cannot achieve optimal seat height with enough insertion, then by all means find a longer seat post, or maybe the frame is not fitting. So that is the first thing to take care of. And now when we talk about effective frame size and effective top tube and stack and reach, for most road bicycles, a very rough guide of whether you are in a ballpark frame size is to have a stem that is about 100 centimeters long, 10 centimeters long, 100 millimeters, and place the bars on it, sit on the bicycle with, here the saddle is a bit lower than it should be for my height, but it's easier for me to stay on the ground and show what I mean. So when you use a relatively, stem should not be longer than 12 centimeters, maybe 13 maximum, because you will have, if it is too long, you will have it moving with a great arc as you handle it, so it will affect your handling and weight distribution. But also for road bicycles, it should not be too short, like a few centimeters, because then you will not have a lot of weight on the front wheel, and that can affect handling. It will have less grip with less weight on it. So you want from at least 7, that's I think bare minimum, to 13. I wouldn't go over 13, that's way too much. So a rough ballpark mid-size, about 10 centimeters, is good to make a sort of a measurement. So you put the saddle at your optimal height, and then when you are on the hoods that stick out from these, the modern brake hoods or shifters and brake levers, when you place your hands on those, handlebars should be blocking your view of the front hub. You should not be able to see the axle. So when you sit on a bicycle normally, as you normally ride, the handlebars should be blocking that view. For the bars at the height that suits you, that will also play a part, but that's a rough ballpark value. If you see the hub closer from the bars, so it's down here, that means that the frame is too long, or that the stem is too long. Maybe you could try 7 centimeter long stem or 6 and see if it helps, but don't go below that. That means that the frame is too long for you. And vice versa, if you see from the other end, you are able to see from this side, that means that you need a longer stem. But if you need more than 12 or 13 centimeters, that means that the bicycle is too small for you. So you should find some different frame with longer reach. And another thing is, when you are in the drops and get down to an aerodynamic position, you will probably see the hub when you look down, because then your body elongates a bit more and you lean a bit forward. So at least in my experience, it's best to test from the hoods. And likewise, if you are on the tops, you should be able to see the hub from the closer side, because then you move your body a bit upwards and a bit to the rear. So, but on the hoods, it should be blocking the view. There is a margin of error because of the angles, and there are different tastes and preferences. But if you can see the hub, you should make some adjustment for most people, because that means that something is probably very much off, especially with modern, very wide oversized stem handlebars. So that's some rough, like a guide for frame sizing and choosing the right frame for you. And for more details, see my articles on those topics. And that's all I have for you today. Thank you very much for watching, and cheers.